Greetings, true believers, and welcome to another fantastic episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to contribute and vote in monthly polls, then you can sign up for an amount of your choosing over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description below, along with other places you can find me. Did you know that Marvel Comics wasn't always called Marvel Comics? Initially, the company was known as Timely Publications. The name Marvel Comics was the title of Timely's first comic book issue, which featured the first published appearances of the original Human Torch and Namor the Sub-Mariner. Throughout the 1940s, the company produced a number of other superhero titles, introducing characters like the Angel, the Whizzer, and of course, Captain America. However, by the 1950s, heroes such as these had begun to fall out of fashion. While popular characters like Captain America and the Human Torch made brief returns, other genres of story became the norm. War stories, westerns, science fiction, and, of course, horror anthologies. During this decade, Timely was known as Atlas Comics, and thus we have the Atlas era. Of course, the industry shifted back to a focus on superheroes in the 1960s. At the start of that decade, Atlas was renamed again, becoming Marvel Comics in order of that original book. Not long after that, the Fantastic Four ushered in a new age of heroes, old characters from the 1940s began to return, and the Marvel Universe as we know it was codified. But what about characters from the Atlas era? Well, those stories didn't go ignored. For example, the Captain America who appeared in the 1950s was exposed as an imposter since the original had gone missing at the end of World War II. Other characters from that era also returned in the Marvel Age. This included the likes of Jimmy Woo, Marvel Boy, the Gorilla Man, Venus, Namora, and the Human Robot. These characters ended up joining forces as the aptly named Agents of Atlas. Of course, there are many other tales from the Atlas era featuring characters and creatures who have yet to return. And so for this video, we're going to be looking at another selection of strange tales from before the Marvel Age. But as always, if you enjoy videos like this one, be sure to leave a like and tell me in the comments so that we can keep doing them. Also, stories such as these tended to have twist endings, and so let me know how many that you were able to guess in the comments. Our first story for today comes from Adventures into Terror number 43 and is called The Unknown Partner. This tale begins with a miserly and unscrupulous businessman named Titus H. Crockett. In his cruel quest for money, he completely ruined his younger brother Carter, driving him to suicide. Then one day he was approached by a mysterious red-headed man who promised him immense wealth if he were to gamble his future and become his partner. Titus was naturally skeptical about investing in someone he knew nothing about, but was impressed by the mystery man's portfolio. Furthermore, the man declared that any who worked with him must value money above all else and be able to sacrifice anything to get it. Insisting that he was worthy, Titus confessed to facilitating a number of shady deals that left many people destitute. He even admitted to being responsible for shoddy construction that caused a school to collapse, killing hundreds of innocent children. Satisfied, the mystery man handed over his business card, declaring that Titus would be one of his boys. But just as the unknown partner departed, Titus H. Crockett fell victim to a sudden, fatal heart attack. If only he looked at the card beforehand, he might have realized that his supposed benefactor was none other than Satan himself. Our next story is called The Coffin and is from 1951's Astonishing number 6. This tale begins in November of 1945 with a man named Milton Whitestone. Wealthy and elderly, Whitestone had a fear of being buried alive and ensured that his coffin would be equipped with an oxygen tank and a two-way phone line. His wife Sylvia, however, was eager for Milton to die so that she could finally inherit his fortune. She seemingly got her wish 2 weeks later on December 5th when Milton appeared to drop dead. Hurriedly having him buried, she was ready to begin living her life and spending his money. But then she heard the phone that was connected to the coffin ring and knew that her husband was still alive. With nobody else around to hear it, she simply ripped the phone from the wall and expected Milton to perish once his oxygen ran out. However, it seems that Whitestone had expected his wife's betrayal and prepared a backup plan. Using a second line to contact his friend and attorney Dexter Peck, Milton Whitestone was exhumed shortly thereafter. Wanting revenge, Whitestone instructed Peck to tell Sylvia that he suspected her husband was still alive. Milton intended on laying low for a while, leaving Sylvia to worry and wonder about when he would return. However, she decided to verify what she'd been told for herself and investigated the coffin. Shocked to find it empty, she inadvertently tripped over the oxygen line and fell in. The airtight coffin lid slammed shut behind her, and she found herself unable to open it again. Trapped and alone, she attempted to use the two-way phone to call for help, before remembering that she'd ripped out the other end herself. Back at Whitestone Manor, Milton arrived at a time when Sylvia was usually out and retrieved a number of his belongings. His loyal butler had called a repairman to fix the damaged phone line, but Milton simply told him not to bother before leaving the estate forever. Even so, some say that even now, every year on December 5th, if you listen closely, you can hear the echo of a ringing phone coming from the decrepit remains of Whitestone Manor. Next up, from Journey into Mystery number 3, we have a story called Hands Off. This tale features a man named Eugene Varro, who specialized in crafting realistic-looking but inanimate artificial limbs. He tried to sell his designs to manufacturer Perry Nugent, but he had no interest, insisting that he would only produce functional prosthetics. Frustrated by the uncaring businessman, Varro found himself wishing that he had been born in an earlier era where his skills would have been appreciated. Then, a mysterious spectral entity appeared before him, claiming to have come from just such a time. The ghostly figure wished to take the hands for himself, and Varro agreed to turn them over on one condition. The entity would first have to endow them with the ability and inclination to murder Perry Nugent. The entity agreed and said that it would return to retrieve the hands on the following night. Placing the hands inside of a box, Varro left them outside Nugent's home and rang the doorbell. He ran to the window and hid in wait as the businessman took the package inside. Varro observed as the floating hands emerged from the box and completed their grisly task. He fled the scene of the crime, thinking nothing about leaving the artificial hands in Nugent's house. But then, the following evening, when the spectral entity returned, Varro was unable to give the hands over, as they had been taken by the police. Nonetheless, the being was owed a pair of hands, and if Varro's artificial set was unavailable, then his real ones would have to do. Next, from Journey into Unknown Worlds number 17, we have The Ice Monster Cometh. This tale begins with a man named Fred Hammer, who arrived at the desolate town of Wintersville on a cold, snow-covered evening. He searched for a place to lodge for the night, but none were accepting guests. It seems that everyone in town had locked themselves in their homes for the night and advised Fred to do the same. He soon learned the reason for this fear, as several individuals warned him to flee town before the ice monster arrived. Eventually, someone told him to try trekking up to Tobin's Inn on Glacier Mountain if he was willing to risk staying there. Unsure of what they meant, Fred made his way to the inn and knocked on the door. He met the couple who ran the establishment, Jeffrey and Lucille Tobin, the latter of which eagerly invited him inside. It soon became clear that Jeffrey hated to even hear mention of the ice monster and avoided the topic. Lucille revealed that the townspeople believed that her husband was the beast, and that their business had suffered terribly because of this. Complicating matters further, Lucille found herself very attracted to Fred and began to seduce him. Fred assumed that she had been mistreated by her husband and that she was eager to leave him. This became even more evident when she suggested that they eliminate Jeffrey and blame his death on the ice monster. That same night, Fred spoke to Jeffrey outside, getting him into position so that Lucille could push a massive chunk of ice from the roof, crushing her husband. Fred then went back inside to retrieve his belongings, only to find enormous footprints in the snow when he came back out. Lucille explained that she had made them so that the townsfolk would blame the ice monster when they found the corpse. She then prepared the horse and sleigh so that they could ride into town and tell the police of Jeffrey's death. However, when Fred took the reins, he took a turn in the wrong direction and began taking her deeper into the mountains. Lucille protested, telling her new lover that she was scared and that they should turn around. But she soon learned that it was too late when she realized that Fred Hammer was really the ice monster. Next up, from 1954's Marvel Tales number 120, we have a boy who was too smart for his age. This story starts with a married couple, John and Sally Shannon, being awakened in the middle of the night by a mysterious crying. Getting up to investigate, they found what appeared to be an abandoned baby boy lying on their doorstep. With no clues to the child's true parentage, the couple took him in and began to raise him as their own. But then one day they were shocked when the infant suddenly spoke with the cadence and understanding of a grown adult. Things only got stranger from there as the boy took a keen interest in reading. He largely dismissed fiction and classical literature, instead focusing on math and science. Baby Shannon even demonstrated incredible artistic talent and drew a lifelike representation of his foster parents. But then when he was alone, the mysterious child plunged a pair of scissors into his artwork. At that exact moment, John and Sally felt the effects of this stabbing and fell over dead. Their corpses were eventually discovered, but the police found no sign of baby Shannon. Or should I say, Agent Sarto. He returned to his actual people, rendezvousing with a flying saucer in an isolated field. Back at his home base, he reported his findings on Earth language, culture, and scientific acumen. Furthermore, he confirmed that his species' resemblance to human infants would make their covert invasion possible. Soon after that, all across the planet Earth, thousands of childless couples found mysterious children waiting for them on their doorsteps. Next, from Mystery Tales number 17, we have a story called The Man Without Eyes. This time, we begin with a Parisian artist, Pierre Rocher, who longed to win a distinguished sculpting competition. He was also an angry, resentful man who tended to lash out at others easily. This is what happened when his impressive sculpture lost in the coveted Grand Prix and he flew into a rage. He demanded to know who had beaten him and was shocked to learn that the winner was a blind man from Greece who had presented an incredibly detailed and lifelike statue. Baffled by this, he decided to investigate further and discovered where this man was staying. That night, he banged on the door and threatened to choke him to death if he didn't reveal the secret of his statue. Panicking, the blind man admitted that it wasn't he who made the sculpture, but his wife. Still not satisfied, the angry Frenchman pushed forward, forcing his way into the sleeping woman's bedchamber. The beautiful Greek woman arose from her slumber and slowly removed her nightcap, but it seems that this would be the last thing that Pierre Rocher ever laid his eyes on. As it turns out, the blind man's wife was none other than the legendary Gorgon Medusa, whose gaze turned mortal men to solid stone. Next up, from Mystic number 43, we have a 1956 story simply titled Jukebox. This tale features an unsuccessful troupe of musicians who took refuge in an empty tavern during a mountain storm. Their boredom there was soon alleviated when an enigmatic man appeared in the doorway to deliver a classic jukebox, simply telling them to play it wisely. However, when one of them, Pete, went to thank the man, their unknown benefactor had already disappeared. Thinking nothing of this, another musician, Ray, decided to play the song Apple for Teacher on the machine. Much to his surprise, as soon as he did this, several apples mysteriously fell from the ceiling. June then put on the song Pennies from Heaven, and coins began raining down. Jack tried playing El Rancho Grande, and initially it seemed like this song had no effect. But then, upon looking outside, the band saw that a sprawling ranch had indeed appeared. At this point, the musicians began to grow more eager as June forced her way back to the jukebox. She played Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, causing the gems to fall into her hands. By this point, the foursome started pushing and fighting as each one wanted to be the next to choose a song. In the ensuing scuffle, Jack hit a button with his elbow, inadvertently making a selection. The tune that played was Gone with the Wind, and soon a strong breeze blew through the tavern, taking the apples, pennies, and diamonds with it. When the gust finally settled, they realized that even the ranch had disappeared, along with the jukebox itself. Back to square one, the musicians were struck with the unmistakable realization that they all could have been rich if only they'd worked together and played it wisely. Next, from 1957's Spellbound number 32, we have a story called When the Finger Points. This tale features a man named Joe Harris, who was surprised one day when his young son Billy ran home crying. Concerned for the boy, Joe sat with his son and asked him what was the matter. Billy was hesitant, but explained that earlier that day he was walking through town pretending to be a sheriff on the hunt for criminals. Seeing a man with a scar on his face, Billy raised his hand, pointed his finger like a gun, and yelled, "Bang!" Much to the boy's surprise, the man seemingly disappeared in a flash of light. Billy was shocked, but initially assumed that his eyes were somehow playing tricks on him. However, curiosity got the better of him, and he raised his finger toward another man, noticing that he also had a scar. This seemed to confirm what happened, as this man also disappeared when he spoke the word bang. By this point, Billy was growing more frightened and wanted to run home, but felt like his feet were rooted to the ground. He didn't want to do this to anyone else, but couldn't stop his hand from raising towards another scarred man. Once this man disappeared, Billy regained control of his body and ran home crying. Joe Harris comforted his son, reasoning that the three scarred men he'd seen must have been a daydream of some sort. Wanting to prove this and alleviate Billy's worry, he insisted that the boy point his finger at him and say the word. Billy argued, not wanting anything bad to happen to his father, but Joe demanded that he go through with it. Frightened but obedient, Billy raised his hand, pointed his finger towards his father, closed his eyes, and said the word. Bang! The deed done, he opened his eyes to see the result. Fortunately, it seems as though his father was right, and a relieved Billy rushed into his arms. Not long after that, however, a news report came over the radio, declaring that a group of wanted terrorists called the Three Scars had mysteriously vanished. Next, from 1958's Strange Tales number 61, we have Fear Walks on 4 Feet. This story features a man named Jim Andrews who had developed a radiation-powered ray gun designed to stun dangerous animals for capture. However, his business partner, Lester Morse, was jealous of Jim's relationship with their old friend, Ruth, and plotted against him. When the duo traveled to Africa to test his device, Lester knew that its failure would financially ruin Jim. Intending on testing it with a live lion, Jim placed bait beside a smooth green rock. Lester manned the gun, but set its power to maximum intensity, expecting it to kill the lion. However, the machine overloaded and exploded, sending Lester flying backwards. Dazed but alive, Lester awakened but was terrified when he beheld a massive dinosaur in front of him. Deducing that the radioactive explosion had somehow sent him into the distant past, Lester fled and took refuge in a nearby cave. Too frightened to venture out, he lived in that cave for the following year, hoping that someday the effects of the radiation would wear off and he would return home. He never saw any other prehistoric beasts, and eventually it seemed like the one that he did witness was no longer nearby. Gathering the courage to explore, he wandered further and encountered more modern-day humans. Realizing that he was once again in the 20th century, he returned to the United States and reunited with Jim and Ruth. He learned that those two had been married for the better part of a year, and that they were doing very well financially. It turns out that the green rock Jim had placed the bait on was actually a dinosaur egg, and that the concentrated blast of radiation had caused it to rapidly age to adulthood. Our final story for this week is called I Was the Miracle Man, from 1959's Strange Worlds No. 2. For this tale, we begin in the far-flung future of 2000 AD, where a child named Bruno Storm was born. Bruno was brilliant but abrasive, and so growing up his only friend was a boy named Henry Stubbs, with whom he shared a birthday. As Bruno grew, his intelligence surpassed everyone around him, and so too did his ego. Academics, athletics, and even romance all seemed to come naturally to Bruno Storm. As an adult, he became a businessman, acquiring companies and amassing wealth with total disregard for the well-being of other people. Soon, he became known as the Miracle Man, the smartest and most ruthless person on Earth. Eventually, he grew bored and told his old friend Henry that he had decided to conquer the planet. However, Henry reasoned that doing so would be too easy, that if he really wanted a challenge, he should set out to take over an alien planet instead. Rising to this, Bruno began designing an interstellar spacecraft, and within a month he was on his way. 3 months after that, he touched down on an alien world with what appeared to be modern cities. However, he saw no vehicles, and the people who lived there looked and dressed like humans from centuries past. They spoke no audible language, but a moment later, the Miracle Man felt their thoughts reaching out to him. Speaking telepathically, the aliens regarded Bruno's attempts at verbal communication as primitive and animalistic. A moment later, they used their vast mental powers to teleport this invader, locking him away. While Bruno Storm may have been a miracle man on Earth, on another planet he was little more than a zoo animal. Alright heroes, that is all I've got for you this week. Did you guess the endings to any of these stories? Let me know how many you got in the comments. And let me say thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. We are closing in on 100,000 subscribers, and with your help, I think we can get there. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me, including my Patreon page where, for only $1 a month, you can get your name in these special thanks here, and vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel. But that is indeed all I have for you this week, and so until next time, true believers, Excelsior!